The bandage should have been just another invisible mark on an invisible woman Amara Johnson ignored. Another wound in a city that had slowly broken her down piece by piece, morning by morning, as she moved through Min-jun Park's penthouse like a ghost. But when she placed his coffee on the marble table with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, something dangerous roared to life inside the most feared man in Seoul's underworld. Stop. His voice cut through the morning silence like a blade. Amara froze, the empty silver tray clutched against her chest, her heart hammering so hard she thought he might hear it. In 5 years of working in this sprawling penthouse that overlooked the Han River, Min-jun Park had never spoken directly to her. Never looked at her. She was part of the furniture, part of the expensive backdrop of his violent, glittering world. Look at me. She couldn't. She stared at the floor-to-ceiling windows instead, at the autumn sunlight turning the river gold 40 stories below, at anything except the man sitting at the dining table in a black suit that probably cost more than she'd earn in 2 years. I said, look at me, Amara. Her name in his mouth felt like a shock. Her head snapped up before she could stop herself, and for the first time in 5 years, their eyes met. His were dark, sharp, calculating. The eyes of a man who built an empire by seeing everything others tried to hide. The eyes of someone who had ordered deaths over dinner and never lost sleep. For the first time in 20 years of absolute power, Min-jun Park felt completely out of control. Who did this to you? The question came out rougher than he intended. He watched her dark eyes widen, watched her hand flutter unconsciously to the white bandage covering her left cheek and temple. The edges were already spotted with blood seeping through.
Fresh.
Recent. This morning recent. No one, sir.
I
fell. Don't lie to me. He stood slowly, deliberately, giving her time to run if she wanted. But she didn't. She stood there in her plain black uniform dress, shoulders back despite the fear radiating from her, and something ancient and forgotten stirred in his chest. Respect. When was the last time anyone had stood their ground in front of him? It's nothing, Mr. Park. Please, I have work.
Who did this?
The words came out quiet, lethal. He watched her throat work as she swallowed, watched her fingers tighten on the tray until her knuckles went pale. And then, so quietly he almost missed it. My boyfriend. But it won't happen again. I'll handle it. The world shifted between them. Min-jun had built his life on control, on calculated distance, on never letting anyone matter enough to become a weakness. But as he looked at this woman, this strong, proud woman who cleaned his home and cooked his meals and existed in his space like a shadow, something clicked into place with the finality of a gun's hammer. She was his to protect now, whether she knew it yet or not. Amara Johnson had come to Seoul 5 years ago with hope bright enough to ignore the warnings. Ghana had been suffocating with poverty, with her mother's medical bills that mounted faster than she could count, with the promise of good money for domestic work in Korea. The agency had made it sound simple. 2 years, maybe 3, send money home, return with enough to start over. She'd been so naive. Now she was 32, trapped in a cycle of work visas tied to employers who knew exactly how desperate she was, sending everyone she could spare to Accra while living in a tiny room in Itaewon that cost $800 a month and still had mold in the corners. Her mother's diabetes wasn't getting better. The bills weren't getting smaller. And Juno, who she'd met 2 years ago and thought might be her way out, had turned out to be just another cage. The first time he hit her was 6 months ago. She'd been late meeting him because Mr. Park had unexpected guests and needed the penthouse perfect. Juno had been drinking, said she was disrespecting him, that foreign women needed to learn their place in Korea. The slap had shocked her more than hurt her. She should have left then. But leaving meant losing her work visa sponsor. Leaving meant explaining to a system that barely saw her as human why she needed help. Leaving meant admitting she'd failed at the one thing she came here to do, survive long enough to save her mother. So she'd stayed, and the hitting got worse. And this morning, when she told Juno she was too tired to meet him after working a double shift, he'd shown up at her apartment at dawn and put her head through the bathroom mirror. The bandage was the best she could do before her shift started at 6. The blood had mostly stopped. She could hide it. She'd gotten good at hiding things. What she hadn't counted on was Min-jun Park actually seeing her. Minjun Park wasn't supposed to care about his maid's problems. He had an empire to run, nightclubs that laundered money, protection rackets that kept half of Gangnam in line, politicians in his pocket, and rivals who would kill him given half a chance. He'd built all of it from nothing after his father died in prison, after his mother drank herself to death from shame, after the world showed him that power was the only thing that mattered. For 20 years, he'd been untouchable. Cold. The Dragon of Soul, they called him, because his rage burned everything it touched, and his mercy was a myth. He didn't have time for compassion. But standing in his dining room, looking at Amara's proud, terrified face, at the blood seeping through inadequate bandages, at the way she held herself together through sheer force of will, he remembered something he thought he'd killed long ago. He remembered what it felt like to be helpless, to be overlooked, to be invisible while the world ground you down. "What's his name?" Minjun asked quietly. "Mr. Park, please." "His name, Amara." She looked at him then, really looked at him, and he saw the moment she understood. This wasn't curiosity. This wasn't even kindness. This was something far more dangerous. This was a man who had decided she mattered. "Kong Juno," she whispered. "But he works for someone. He said his boss knows people. If I cause problems." "Who does he work for?" "I don't know. He never said exactly. But he has money, drives a nice car, has a tattoo of a snake on his wrist." Minjun's jaw tightened. He knew that tattoo. Knew exactly which organization marked their foot soldiers like that. The Jade Snakes ran most of the drug trade in Itaewon and had been pushing into his territory for months. They were small-time, vicious, and stupid enough to think they could challenge him. And one of their thugs had put his hands on his maid. "You're not going back to him," Minjun said flatly. "I have to. My things are in my apartment and he knows where I—" "You're not going back to him," he repeated, and this time his voice carried the weight of absolute authority. The voice that made grown men confess their sins. "You work for me now. You live under my protection. That means no one touches you. Ever. Do you understand?" Amara stared at him like he'd spoken a foreign language. "Mr. Park, I can't just—" "You can. You will." He pulled out his phone, pressed a number. "Jean Ho, I need you at the penthouse.
Now."
Bring the car and 2 men. He hung up, turned back to Amara. "My driver will take you to your apartment. My men will collect your belongings. You'll stay in the guest suite here until I can arrange something more permanent. I can't afford. You're not paying for it. Consider it part of your employment benefits. Mr. Park. And take that off." He gestured to the bandage with barely controlled fury. "I'm calling my personal doctor. He'll be here in 20 minutes to examine you properly." "I'm fine, really." He crossed the distance between them in 3 strides, and she gasped as he reached out, not touching her, never touching without permission, but close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the expensive cologne, and underneath it something darker, something dangerous and absolutely focused on her. "You are not fine," he said softly, terribly. "You are hurt. In my home. Under my watch.
And that ends today.
Do you understand me, Amara?" She should have been terrified. This was Minjun Park, the Dragon of Soul, whose reputation was built on blood and ruthlessness. But looking into his eyes, all she felt was something she hadn't felt in years. "Safe." "Yes," she whispered. "I understand." "Good." He stepped back, professional distance restored, but something had changed in the air between them. Something irreversible. "Now sit down before you fall down. You're shaking."
She was.
She sank into one of his dining chairs, the first time she'd ever sat in his presence, and watched as this feared crime lord moved to his bar, poured something amber into crystal, and brought it to her.
"Drink.
"It'll steady your nerves." "I'm working. You're off duty until my doctor clears you. Drink, Amara." She drank. The whiskey burned down her throat, expensive and smooth, probably worth more than her monthly salary. When she looked up, Minjun was watching her with an intensity that should have frightened her, but instead made her feel seen for the first time since she'd arrived in this country. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet." His smile was cold, dangerous, promising violence to someone who wasn't her. "I haven't even started." And as Amara sat in Minjun Park's penthouse, drinking his whiskey while his world rearranged itself around her protection, she realized her life would never be ordinary again. For better or worse, she belonged to the dragon now. Dr. Huang arrived exactly 20 minutes later, a thin man in his 60s with steady hands and the discretion that came from treating Minjun's organization for 2 decades. He examined Amara's face in Minjun's study while the crime lord stood by the window, ostensibly looking at his phone but watching every movement in the reflection. 5 stitches, Dr. Huang announced, snapping off his gloves. The cut is clean but deep. She was lucky it missed her eye by 2 centimeters. I've cleaned and rebandaged it properly. The bruising will get worse before it gets better. He paused, his voice carefully neutral. This wasn't an accident. I know, Minjun said quietly. She'll need the stitches removed in a week. I've given her antibiotics and pain medication. Strong ones. She should rest for at least 2 days.
She will.
After Dr. Huang left, Minjun turned to find Amara standing uncertainly by the desk, looking small and exhausted in the expensive room filled with art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. The new bandage was professional, clean, but somehow made the violence done to her even more stark. Jean Ho texted, Minjun said, keeping his voice even though rage simmered just beneath his skin. Your belongings are being collected now. He said your boyfriend showed up while they were packing. Amara's face went pale. Is he? He's alive. Jean Ho can be very persuasive about encouraging people to leave quietly. Minjun set his phone down. But he knows you're under my protection now. He won't come near you again. You don't understand. Juno, he doesn't back down. He'll do nothing. The words came out with absolute finality. Because if he's stupid enough to try, he won't live long enough to regret it. The casual way Minjun said it, like he was discussing the weather rather than someone's death, should have horrified her. Instead, Amara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. For 2 years she'd lived in fear, trying to manage Juno's temper, walking on eggshells, believing somehow it was her responsibility to keep the peace. And here was this dangerous man telling her simply, you don't have to be afraid anymore. I don't know how to repay you for this, she said softly.
You don't repay it.
You accept it. Minjun moved closer, his eyes searching her face. When did you last eat? I breakfast yesterday, I think. His jaw tightened. The guest suite is on the 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left.
Go rest.
I'll have food sent up in an hour. Mr. Park, I should work. Amara. He said her name like a command and a caress at once. You're injured, exhausted, and probably in shock. You will go rest, eat, and sleep. That's not a request. She should have bristled at being ordered around. Instead, she found herself nodding, too tired to fight, too overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her entire life. As she turned to leave, his voice stopped her. Amara? Yes. You're safe here. I need you to believe that. She looked back at him, this powerful man who had inserted himself into her life with the force of a hurricane, and found herself believing it despite every instinct that said trusting him was dangerous. I'm starting to, she admitted. Something shifted in his expression, satisfaction, possession, something darker and more complex.
Good.
Now go rest before you collapse in my study, and I have to carry you upstairs. The thought of Minjun Park carrying her maid heat flooded her cheeks. She fled before he could see it. 3 days later, Amara had expected the guest suite to be nice. What she found was a space larger than her entire apartment had been, decorated in soft creams and grays with a view of the Han River that took her breath away. The bed was enormous. The bathroom had a soaking tub that could fit 3 people, and the closet held clothes in her exact size that she definitely hadn't owned before. She'd spent the first day sleeping, the pain medication pulling her under into dreamless darkness. The second day, she'd woken to find breakfast on a tray outside her door. Not the simple rice and soup she'd expected, but fresh fruit, yogurt, pastries from an expensive bakery, and coffee made exactly how she liked it. She didn't remember ever telling anyone how she took her coffee. By the 3rd day, the guilt of not working had her emerging from the suite at dawn, determined to at least make herself useful. She found Minjun already awake in the kitchen, of all places, attempting to make coffee and clearly failing based on his expression of intense concentration. "You're supposed to be resting," he said without turning around. "How did you know I was here?" "I always know what's happening in my home." He glanced over his shoulder, and his eyes did a quick assessment that made her aware she was wearing one of the silk pajama sets that had appeared in the closet. "How's your face?" "Better. The pain medication helps." She moved closer despite herself. "Are you trying to make coffee?" "I'm discovering I don't actually know how. My previous maid always had it ready." "Your previous maid?" "I fired her. She's been stealing from me for 6 months." He said it casually, but Amara heard what he didn't say. He'd known all along and done nothing until he needed an excuse to rearrange his household staff around her. "I can make it," she offered. "You're injured." "My hands work fine." She reached for the coffee maker, and their fingers brushed. The contact sent electricity up her arm that had nothing to do with static. She pulled back quickly, but not before she saw his eyes darken slightly. "Show me how," he said quietly. "What?" "Show me how to make coffee. If you're going to insist on working when you should be resting, at least let me learn something useful." It was so absurd, this feared crime lord wanting a coffee lesson, that she almost laughed. Instead, she found herself walking him through the steps, hyper-aware of him standing close behind her, watching over her shoulder as she measured grounds and poured water. "You're very patient," he observed. "You're very determined to learn something you could have any number of people do for you." "Maybe I don't want other people doing it." His voice dropped lower. "Maybe I want to learn from you." The coffee maker gurgled in the silence that followed. Amara focused on it intently, trying to ignore the way her heart had started racing, the way his presence behind her felt like heat against her back. "Why are you really doing this?" she asked softly. "All of this. I'm just your maid." "No," the word came out sharp. "You were never just anything, Amara. And I'm doing this because someone needed to. Because you deserve better than what this city has given you." Because he paused, and when he spoke again his voice carried something raw she'd never heard from him. "Because when I looked at you that morning, I saw someone I recognized. Someone who survived everything thrown at them through sheer stubborn strength. And I decided right then that you were mine to protect. I'm not a possession."
No.
"You're something far more dangerous than that." He moved slightly closer, and she felt his breath against her ear. "You're someone I can't stop thinking about." The coffee maker beeped, saving her from having to respond. She poured 2 cups with shaking hands, added cream to hers, and slid his across the counter black the way she'd noticed he preferred it. "How did you know?" he asked, taking a sip. "I pay attention."
So do I, Amara. So do I.
They drank their coffee in charged silence as dawn broke over Seoul outside the windows, the city waking up below them, and Amara felt the careful distance she'd been trying to maintain begin to crumble. 2 weeks later. Minjun had always been a man of control, but Amara Johnson was testing every boundary he'd ever built. She'd been living in his penthouse for 2 weeks now, and he discovered several inconvenient truths about himself. First, he liked having her there. Liked coming home to find her reading in the living room, her legs tucked under her on his leather couch, completely absorbed in whatever novel she discovered in his library. Liked the way she hummed while cooking, old songs from Ghana that made the sterile penthouse feel lived in for the first time. Liked watching her grow stronger each day, her bruises fading, her confidence returning. Second, he was becoming dangerously possessive. When his business partner made an offhand comment about the beautiful woman living in your home, Minjun had nearly broken the man's jaw before catching himself. The intensity of his reaction had shocked them both. Third, and most problematically, he wanted her in ways that went far beyond protection. Wanted to know everything about her. Wanted to make her laugh. Wanted to see what she looked like when she woke up, sleepy and soft. Wanted things he had no right to want from someone who worked for him, who relied on him, who was vulnerable in ways that made his desire feel like a violation. So he'd been keeping his distance as much as possible, conducting business from his home office, treating her with careful professionalism, ignoring the way his body responded every time she walked into a room. It was killing him, Mr. Park. He looked up from his laptop to find Amara standing in his office doorway, holding a covered dish that smelled incredible. "I made dinner," she said. "I know you said I didn't have to cook anymore, but I wanted to." To thank you. And because she paused, looking almost shy. Because I thought you might like to try something from Ghana. Minjun's throat tightened inexplicably. In 20 years of building his empire, no one had ever cooked for him. Not like this. Not as a gift. You didn't have to do that. I know. But I wanted to. She set the dish on his desk. It's jollof rice with chicken. My mother's recipe. It's home for me. The fact that she was sharing something so personal made something crack in his chest. He stood, moving around the desk to look at the food she'd prepared. The rice was red-orange, fragrant with spices he didn't recognize, the chicken perfectly browned. It looks incredible, he said honestly. Would you, she hesitated. Would you like to eat with me? I made enough for two. Unless you're too busy. I'm not too busy. The words came out faster than he intended. Give me 5 minutes to finish this email. Her smile was brilliant, transforming her whole face, and Minjun felt like he'd won something more valuable than any territory or deal he'd ever closed. They ate in his dining room, the same place where their lives had first collided over coffee and blood, and Minjun discovered that Amara's mother's jollof rice was possibly the best thing he'd ever tasted, rich and spicy and complex in ways that made his usual expensive meals seem bland by comparison. This is incredible, he said, watching her face light up with pleasure at his approval. Really? It's not too spicy. It's perfect. Tell me about your mother. Amara's expression softened. She's strong. Stubborn. She worked 3 jobs to raise me after my father died when I was 7. Put me through school even when we could barely afford food. When she got sick, her voice caught. I had to do something. The treatments cost so much, and there was nothing in Ghana. Coming here seemed like the answer. Does she know what you've been through?
No.
I send money. I call every week and tell her everything is wonderful. She can't know I failed her. You didn't fail her, Amara. You survived. There's a difference. She looked at him with something like wonder. How do you understand that? Minjun set down his fork, weighing how much to share. But she'd given him a piece of her heart with this meal, and he found himself wanting to give something back. My father went to prison when I was 12, he said quietly. Fraud, embezzlement, things I didn't understand then. We lost everything. My mother started drinking to cope. By the time I was 15, she'd drunk herself to death, and I was alone. He paused, the old memories sharp as broken glass. I did things I'm not proud of to survive. Worked for people who saw a desperate kid and used him. By the time I was 20, I'd learned that power was the only thing that protected you. So I took it. Is that why you? She gestured vaguely, encompassing his empire, his reputation, the violence that surrounded him.
Yes.
I built this, so I'd never be helpless again. So no one could take anything from me. So I'd never have to depend on anyone's mercy. He looked at her directly. Until you walked into my life with blood on your face and steel in your spine, and I realized that all this power means nothing if I can't use it to protect people who matter. I matter to you? The question hung in the air between them, dangerous and honest. Minjun held her gaze, letting her see the truth he'd been trying to hide. Yes, Amara. You matter to me. More than you should. More than is probably smart for either of us. She drew in a shaky breath. Mr. Park. Minjun. When we're alone like this, call me Minjun. Minjun. She tested the name, and hearing it in her voice felt like intimacy.
I don't know what this is.
Neither do I, he admitted. But I know I don't want it to stop. Before either of them could say more, his phone buzzed with an alert. Minjun glanced at it and felt ice flood his veins. Security cameras had picked up movement outside the building. 3 men, all carrying weapons, all wearing the snake tattoo of the Jade Snakes organization. Juno had been stupid enough to come back. Amara, Minjun said calmly, standing in one smooth motion. I need you to go to my bedroom, lock the door, and stay there until I come for you. What's wrong? Nothing I can't handle, but I need to know you're safe. He pulled out his phone, texting his security team rapid instructions.
Please.
Trust me. She must have heard something in his voice because she didn't argue, just nodded and moved quickly toward the stairs. Minjun waited until he heard the bedroom door lock before he walked to his safe, pulled out the handgun he kept there, and checked the magazine with practiced efficiency. The Jade Snakes had made a fatal mistake. They'd come to his home. They'd threatened what was his. And now Minjun was going to remind them exactly why people called him the Dragon of Soul. He descended to the lobby with murder in his heart. The lobby of Minjun's building was marble and glass, designed to impress with its cold elegance. By the time he reached it, his security team had already intercepted the three men. Jinho, his head of security, had Juno pressed against the wall with professional efficiency, while two other guards restrained his companions. Minjun walked across the polished floor with deliberate slowness, letting Juno see him coming, letting the fear build. The younger man's eyes widened with recognition and something that might have been panic. "Mr. Park, I can explain." "Explain what?" Minjun's voice was conversational, almost friendly, which made it more terrifying. "Explain why you thought it was acceptable to put your hands on someone under my protection? Explain why you came to my home armed and stupid? Please, Juno. I'm fascinated to hear this explanation. She's my girlfriend. You can't just take her." Minjun moved faster than Juno could track, slamming him harder against the wall, his forearm across the younger man's throat. Not enough to choke, but enough to make breathing difficult. Enough to communicate exactly how precarious his position was. "She was never yours," Minjun said softly, his face inches from Juno's. "She was a person you abused because you're weak and pathetic and needed someone smaller to make yourself feel powerful. But that ends tonight. Do you know why?" Juno wheezed something that might have been a response. "Because she belongs to me now. Not as property. As someone under my absolute protection. And I protect what's mine, Juno. I protect it with everything I have." Minjun leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than shouting ever could. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave Seoul. Tonight. Jinho will escort you to collect whatever you can carry, and then you'll get on a train to Busan or anywhere else that isn't here. If you ever come back, if you ever try to contact her, if I even hear that you've mentioned her name, I will kill you. Not quickly. Not cleanly. I will make it last days, and I will make sure you understand exactly what happens to men who hurt women I care about. Do we have an understanding?" Juno nodded frantically, his face purple. "I can't hear you."
Yes.
"Yes, I understand." Minjun released him, stepping back and smoothing his suit jacket as if he hadn't just threatened a man's life. "Good. Jinho, make sure he's on a train within the hour. If he gives you any trouble, feel free to be creative in your methods of persuasion." "It would be my pleasure, sir," Jinho said with a hint of a smile. "Wait." One of Juno's companions spoke up, trying to sound brave and failing. "Our boss isn't going to like this. The Jade Snakes don't forget." "Your boss." Minjun turned his attention to the man with the kind of focus that made seasoned criminals confess their sins. "Your boss runs a mid-level drug operation that exists only because I've allowed it to. Tell him if he has a problem with how I handle discipline, he's welcome to discuss it with me personally. I'll even clear my schedule." He smiled, cold and sharp as a knife. "I'm sure we'll have a very brief conversation." The man paled and said nothing else. Minjun watched as his security team escorted the three men out, Juno stumbling between his friends, and felt the familiar coldness of violence settle over him like a second skin. This was who he was. This was what his world required. And Amara had just witnessed a glimpse of it. He found her standing at the top of the stairs when he returned to the penthouse, her eyes wide, one hand pressed to her mouth. She'd heard everything. The building's acoustics carried sound, and he'd made no effort to keep his voice down. "Are they gone?" she asked quietly.
Yes.
"Juno won't bother you again." "What did you do to him?" "What was necessary?" Minjun stopped at the bottom of the stairs, keeping distance between them, giving her space to process what she'd overheard. "I told you I'd protect you, Amara. This is what that means in my world." She descended slowly, each step deliberate, until she stood one step above him, bringing them almost eye to eye. He expected fear, expected her to retreat back into the safety of distance. Instead, she reached out and touched his face with tentative fingers, as if confirming he was real. "You scared me," she said softly. "I know. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I'm not scared of you, Minjun. I'm scared because of how much I trusted that you'd handle it. How much she paused, searching for words. How much I've started to depend on you. That terrifies me. He caught her hand, holding it against his cheek, feeling the warmth of her palm against his skin. Why does that terrify you? Because people I depend on leave.
Or die.
Or hurt me. Because nothing this good ever lasts for someone like me. Someone like you? He turned his head slightly, pressing his lips to her palm in a kiss that made her breath catch. Someone strong enough to survive in a foreign country alone? Someone brave enough to stand up to me when I'm being an overbearing ass? Someone who makes my cold, empty home feel like it matters for the first time in 20 years. Minjun. I'm falling in love with you, Amara. The words came out raw, unplanned, more honest than anything he'd said in decades. I've been falling since that first morning. Since you stood in my dining room bleeding and scared but refusing to break. I know it's too soon. I know the power dynamic is complicated. I know I'm dangerous and my world is violent and you deserve better than what I can offer. But I'm falling in love with you anyway, and I needed you to know. The silence that followed felt eternal. Minjun watched emotions chase across her face. Shock, fear, something that might have been hope. When she finally spoke, her voice shook. I don't know if I can be part of this world. The violence, the danger, I'm not asking you to decide tonight. I'm just telling you the truth. What you do with it is your choice.
Always your choice, Samara.
If you want to leave, I'll set you up somewhere safe with enough money to take care of your mother. If you want to stay but keep distance, I'll respect that. But if you want, he paused, vulnerability cracking through his usual control. If you want to explore what this is between us, I promise I'll do everything in my power to keep you safe. To make you happy. To deserve you. You already do, she whispered, and his heart stopped. Deserve me, I mean. You already do. You're the first person in 5 years who's seen me. Who's made me feel like I matter. Like I'm not just surviving, but actually living. She took a shaking breath. And I think I'm falling in love with you too, which is absolutely insane considering everything, but there it is. Minjun didn't remember moving, but suddenly he was on her step, his hands framing her face with infinite gentleness, his forehead resting against hers as they breathed the same air. Say that again, he demanded softly. Which part? The part where you're falling in love with me. I'm falling in love with you, Minjun Park. God help me, but I am. She tasted like the spices from dinner, like sweetness and heat, like everything he'd been missing without knowing it. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers again, unwilling to let her go. I want to do this right, he said roughly. I want to court you properly, take you to dinner, show you the parts of Seoul you haven't seen, let you decide if this is what you want without the pressure of living in my home. I think we're past proper, Minjun. Then let me try anyway. Let me show you that I'm not just the dragon. Let me prove I can be the man you deserve. She pulled back enough to look at him, her eyes searching his face. What if your world doesn't let us have this? What if being with you makes me a target? Then I'll burn that world down before I let anyone hurt you. He said it simply like a fact because it was. I've built an empire, Amara. I can rebuild it around keeping you safe if that's what it takes. That's insane. That's love. He smiled slightly, the expression still unfamiliar on his usually cold face. I warned you I was dangerous. She laughed, the sound startled and genuine, and kissed him again, softer this time, like a promise. When she pulled back, her smile was the most beautiful thing he'd ever seen. Okay, she said. Okay, court me properly. Take me to dinner. Show me Seoul. But Minjun. She cupped his face with both hands, making sure he was listening. I'm already sure. I'm already yours. Everything else is just details. Mine, he repeated, the word tasting like a vow. Yours, she confirmed. If you'll have me, if I'll have you? He laughed, actually laughed, the sound rusty from disuse. Amara, you're the best thing that's ever walked into my life. Having you is all I want. They stood there on the stairs, wrapped in each other, as Seoul glittered outside the windows and the night settled around them like a blessing. For the first time in his violent, lonely life, Minjun Park felt something more powerful than fear or rage. He felt hope. 1 week later, true to his word, Minjun courted Amara with the same focused intensity he brought to everything else. He took her to a private restaurant in Gangnam where the chef prepared a 7-course meal that made her moan with pleasure at every bite. He showed her the secret gardens hidden in the heart of the city, places tourists never found. He took her shopping in Myeongdong and insisted on buying her everything she glanced at twice, ignoring her protests. "I'm not your sugar baby," she'd said, exasperated but laughing as he added another designer bag to their growing collection. "No, you're the woman I'm courting, and I'm allowed to spoil you," he'd replied, unrepentant. "Besides, watching you try to refuse gifts is the most entertainment I've had in years." But the evening that changed everything came a week after their first kiss, when Minjun took her to his favorite Korean restaurant in Itaewon, a small, unassuming place that served the best home-style food in Seoul. "I've been coming here since I was 15, Minjun told her as they settled into a private room with low tables and cushioned floors. "The owner, Mrs. Kim, fed me when I had no money. She never asked questions, never judged. She just made sure I ate. Does she know what you do now?" "She knows exactly what I do. And she still makes me kimchi jjigae when I visit." He smiled slightly. "She says I need someone to take care of me since I'm terrible at taking care of myself." The door slid open and a tiny woman in her 70s entered, carrying a tray loaded with dishes. Her face lit up when she saw Minjun, and she unleashed a torrent of Korean that made him laugh and respond in the same language. "Amara, this is Mrs. Kim. Mrs. Kim, this is Amara, the woman I told you about." Mrs. Kim's eyes widened with delight, and she said something in rapid Korean that made Minjun's ears turn slightly red. "What did she say?" Amara asked, amused. "She said you're too beautiful for someone like me, and she's wondering what I did to trick you into tolerating my company." Mrs. Kim nodded enthusiastically, then began arranging dishes on the table, explaining each one in broken English mixed with Korean that Minjun translated. There was bulgogi, thin slices of marinated beef that glistened with sauce. Japchae, glass noodles with vegetables. Fresh kimchi that made Amara's eyes water just from the smell. Bibimbap in hot stone bowls that sizzled. "This is too much," Amara protested. Mrs. Kim doesn't understand the concept of too much when it comes to feeding people she cares about, Minjun said warmly. "Just accept it, and prepare to be stuffed beyond capacity." They ate, and Minjun taught her the proper way to eat bibimbap, mixing everything together until the rice at the bottom got crispy from the hot stone. He showed her how to wrap bulgogi in lettuce leaves with garlic and samjang sauce. He taught her to say delicious in Korean, mashisoyo, and laughed when she mispronounced it 3 times before getting it right. "You're patient with me," she observed, watching him carefully prepare a perfect bite and offer it to her with his chopsticks. "You're worth being patient for." He fed her the bite, his eyes dark and warm as he watched her chew. "Besides, I like teaching you. I like being the one to show you things." "Control freak," she teased. "Completely. But you knew that already." They were laughing over her attempts to pick up a piece of slippery japchae with chopsticks when the door slid open without warning. Minjun's entire body went tense, his hand moving instinctively toward his waist where Amara now knew he always carried a gun. But it wasn't an enemy. It was Jin-ho, and his expression was grim. "Sir, we have a situation." Minjun's face went cold, the warmth draining out of it like water. "How urgent?" "Very. The jade snakes hit one of our clubs in Hongdae. 3 of our people injured, 1 critical. They left a message." Jin-ho's eyes flicked to Amara. "About her." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Minjun stood with controlled precision, his voice deadly calm. "What kind of message?" "They said this is payment for humiliating Juno. They said next time they'll come for what you value most." Amara felt ice flood her veins. "Minjun." "Get her to the car," Minjun ordered Jin-ho. "Full security detail. Take her to the safe house in Gangnam. No one gets in or out without my authorization." "I'm not leaving you," Amara said, standing. "Yes, you are." He turned to her, and his face was the dragon now, cold and merciless. "This is my world, Amara. This is what happens when you're with me. People use you to get to me. And I will not risk your life, because I was selfish enough to pull you into this. So, what? You're just going to lock me away while you go to war? If that's what keeps you alive, yes. He cupped her face, and his hands were shaking slightly despite the ice in his voice. I need to handle this. I need to remind the Jade Snakes why challenging me is fatal. And I need to do that knowing you're somewhere they can't touch you. Please, Amara. Please don't fight me on this. She saw the fear beneath his control, the terror that he was hiding behind cold command. This man who faced down enemies without flinching was afraid for her. For her. Okay, she said softly. But you come back to me. You hear me, Minjun Park? You come back. Always, he promised, kissing her hard and fast. Jin Ho, get her out of here.
Now.
The last thing Amara saw as Jin Ho escorted her out was Minjun standing in that small restaurant room, his phone already to his ear, making calls in rapid Korean that sounded like declarations of war. And she realized with dawning horror that loving Minjun meant living with the knowledge that every day might be the day he didn't come home. The safe house was a luxury apartment in a high-rise in Gangnam, anonymous and secure, with bulletproof windows and security systems that would make a bank jealous. Jin Ho stationed 4 guards outside and 2 inside, all armed, all loyal to Minjun without question. Amara paced the living room like a caged animal, her phone clutched at her hand, waiting for updates that weren't coming. It had been 6 hours since Jin Ho brought her here. 6 hours of silence except for the polite assurances from the guards that Mr. Park was fine. Everything was under control. She should rest. She couldn't rest. Couldn't eat. Couldn't do anything except replay that moment in the restaurant when Minjun's face had gone cold and imagine all the ways this night could end with him dead. Her phone finally rang at 2 in the morning, and she answered it before the first ring finished. Minjun. He's fine. Jin Ho's voice came through instead, calm and professional. The situation is contained. Mr. Park is conducting final negotiations now. He asked me to let you know he'll come to you when it's finished. What happened? Is anyone hurt? Our people will recover. The Jade Snakes. Jin Ho paused delicately. The Jade Snakes are no longer a concern. Their leadership has been persuaded to leave Seoul permanently. Amara knew what that careful language meant. Minjun had gone to war, and he'd won, and there was blood on his hands that would never completely wash off. The knowledge should have horrified her. Instead, all she felt was overwhelming relief that he was alive. When will he be here? Within the hour. He wanted to shower and change first. He didn't want you to see another delicate pause. He wanted to be presentable. He didn't want her to see the violence on him, Amara translated. Didn't want her to see what he'd done to protect her. As if she didn't already know, hadn't already accepted what loving him meant. Thank you, Jin Ho, for taking care of him, for bringing me here. It's my honor, Miss Johnson. He's a good man, for all his reputation. The best I've served. And you make him happy in ways I didn't think possible. That's worth protecting. After they hung up, Amara finally sank onto the couch, exhaustion crashing over her. She must have dozed off because the next thing she knew, gentle hands were lifting her, carrying her, and she opened her eyes to find Minjun holding her against his chest, his face drawn with fatigue but whole, alive. Here. You're okay, she breathed, her hands immediately checking him over, searching for wounds. I'm fine. Not a scratch. He carried her to the bedroom, setting her on the bed with infinite care. I'm sorry I worried you. I was terrified, she admitted, pulling him down to sit beside her, needing to touch him, to confirm he was real. Jin Ho said it's handled, but he wouldn't tell me details. The details don't matter. What matters is they'll never threaten you again. No one will. He caught her hands, bringing them to his lips. I've made it known throughout Seoul that you're under my protection. That you're mine. Anyone who comes near you with ill intent signs their own death warrant. You can't protect me from everything, Minjun. Your world is dangerous by nature. Then I'll change my world. He said it with such conviction that she almost believed him. I've been thinking about this all night between handling the situation. I have enough money, enough investments. I could step back from the active side of the business, transition to legitimate operations. It would take time, maybe a year or 2, but I could do it. For you. For us. Amara stared at him, this powerful man who was offering to dismantle his entire empire because she was afraid. You do that? Give up everything you built. In a heartbeat. Don't you understand, Amara? You're not part of my life anymore. You are my life. Everything else is just details I can rearrange. He cupped her face, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me because I've never loved anything before. Never let myself. But you walked into my world with your strength and your kindness and your impossible courage, and you made me want to be someone worthy of you. You already are worthy. I'm a criminal, Amara. I've done things that would horrify you. I've hurt people, killed people, built an empire on fear and blood. But with you, I want to be better. Want to be the man you see when you look at me like that. Like what? Like I'm not a monster. Like I'm just a man you could love. Amara felt tears burning behind her eyes. You're not a monster, Minjun. You're complicated and dangerous, and yes, you've done terrible things. But you're also the man who noticed when I was hurt, who protected me when no one else cared, who learned to make coffee just so we could share something simple, who takes me to meet the woman who fed him when he was alone and hungry. That's who you are. All of it together. I don't deserve you. Maybe not. But you have me anyway. She kissed him softly, tasting exhaustion and relief and love on his lips. I choose you, Minjun. I choose this. Whatever that means. I'm not running. I'm not scared. I'm staying right here. He made a sound low in his throat, something between a groan and a prayer, and pulled her into his lap, deepening the kiss until they were both breathless. His hands moved over her with desperate tenderness, as if he needed to confirm she was real. She was here. She was his. Say it again, he demanded against her mouth. I choose you. Again. I choose you, Minjun Park. I love you. I'm yours. Mine, he breathed, and kissed her like he was drowning and she was air. My Amara. My love. Mine. They made love for the first time in that safe house bedroom as dawn broke over Seoul, and it was nothing like Amara expected. She'd thought it might be rough, possessive, claiming. And there were moments of that, moments when Minjun gripped her hips hard enough to bruise, when he buried his face in her neck and whispered, mine, like a prayer, when his control frayed at the edges and she saw the full force of his desire for her. But mostly it was tender, reverent. He took his time learning every inch of her body, cataloging what made her gasp, what made her arch into his touch, what made her say his name like a plea. He told her she was beautiful in Korean, in English, in the universal language of touch and breath and need. And when he finally moved inside her, his eyes locked on hers, she felt something shift and settle deep in her chest. This was home. Not Seoul. Not Ghana. Not any place. This man. This complicated, dangerous, impossibly gentle man who looked at her like she was salvation. Afterward, they lay tangled together, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her spine. The morning light painted everything gold, and Amara felt more at peace than she had in 5 years. What are you thinking? Minjun asked softly. That I came to Seoul looking for a way to survive. And I found a way to live instead. His arms tightened around her. I was dead long before I met you. Just going through the motions. Building power for its own sake, because I didn't know what else to do. But you brought me back to life, Amara. You made me remember what it feels like to care about something more than survival. We saved each other then. Yes, he agreed, kissing the top of her head. We did. They might have stayed there forever, wrapped in each other and the golden morning light, but Jinho's call interrupted with news that required Minjun's attention. Business that couldn't wait, loose ends that needed tying from the night's events. I have to go handle this, Minjun said reluctantly, already reaching for his phone. But I'll be back by tonight. We'll have dinner here. Something simple. Just us. I'll cook, Amara offered. You don't have to. I want to. I want to take care of you the way you take care of me. The look he gave her was so full of love, it made her chest ache. How did I get so lucky? You notice me when I was invisible. You see me when everyone else looks through me. That's not luck, Minjun. That's who you are underneath everything else. He kissed her one more time, deep and promising, before forcing himself to leave. Amara watched him go, already missing him, but not worried anymore. They'd faced the worst his world could throw at them, and they'd chosen each other anyway. Nothing else could touch that. That evening, Amara was in the safe house kitchen, preparing jollof rice and fried plantains, comfort food from home that she wanted to share with Minjun, when her phone rang from an unknown number. She almost ignored it, but something made her answer. Hello. Amara Johnson? The voice was female, older, speaking accented English. My name is Park Seoyeon. I'm Minjun's aunt, his father's sister. Amara's hand tightened on the phone. Minjun had never mentioned having family. Hello. How did you get this number? I have my ways. I know my nephew keeps me at a distance, and I understand why. Our family failed him badly when he needed us most. The woman paused. But I'm calling because I've heard he's involved with someone.
You.
And I wanted to warn you before it's too late. Ice flooded Amara's veins. Warn me about what? About what loving him costs. About the violence and danger and loneliness of being with a man like Minjun. He's my nephew, and I love him, but he's dangerous, Miss Johnson. His world is dangerous. And everyone who gets close to him either gets hurt or becomes like him. Is that what you want for your life? With all due respect, Mrs. Park, you don't know anything about me or what I want. I know you're a good woman. I know you came here trying to help your family. I know you deserve better than a life spent looking over your shoulder, wondering if today is the day someone uses you to hurt him. Or worse, the day you have to watch him die for his empire. The words hit too close to Amara's fears from the night before. Why are you really calling? Because I lost my brother to this life. I lost my sister-in-law to grief. I don't want to lose my nephew to the same violence. And I don't want to see another good woman destroyed by it. Seo Yun's voice softened. I'm offering you a way out, Miss Johnson. Money, a visa, papers for your mother to come to Korea for treatment, or for you both to go anywhere else. No strings. Just a chance to build the life you came here looking for without all the blood and danger. Amara's heart hammered. It was everything she'd wanted when she first came to Seoul. Security. Her mother's health. Freedom. But it wasn't everything she wanted now. Thank you for your concern, Mrs. Park, Amara said quietly. But I'm exactly where I want to be. Minjun and I chose each other with our eyes open. I know the risks. I accept them. Because loving him isn't a trap or a mistake. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. You say that now. I say that knowing I spent last night terrified he wouldn't come home. Knowing he went to war because someone threatened me. Knowing his world is dangerous and complicated and sometimes brutal. And I'm still here. I'm still choosing him. Every day. Every moment. That's not naivety, Mrs. Park. That's love. There was a long silence. Then, surprisingly, Seo Yun laughed softly. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. Minjun always did have good instincts about people, even if he trusted the wrong ones for too long. Does that mean you approve? It means I hope you survive what's coming. Because loving a Park man is never simple, and Minjun has more enemies than most. But if you're determined to stand beside him, another pause. Then welcome to the family, Amara Johnson. And good luck. You'll need it. The line went dead. Amara stood in the kitchen, her hands shaking slightly, and realized that call had been a test. Not just from Minjun's aunt, but from herself. A chance to walk away with everything she thought she wanted. And she'd chosen Minjun without hesitation. That meant something. Meant she was all in now for better or worse. When Minjun arrived an hour later, she told him about the call. His expression went dark with fury. She had no right. She was protecting you. In her way. Amara pulled him close, feeling him gradually relax against her. And I told her I'm not going anywhere. That I choose you. That I love you. Even after last night? After seeing what my world demands. Especially after last night. Because you came back to me. Because you're here. Because we survived it together. She kissed him softly. I'm not fragile, Minjun. I'm not going to break. I came to this country alone and survived 5 years of hardship. I can survive loving you. You shouldn't have to just survive it. You should get to enjoy it. Be happy. Then make me happy.
Take me on dates.
Teach me more Korean. Introduce me to your world beyond the violence. Show me all the parts of yourself you keep hidden. She smiled. And let me love all of it. The dragon and the man underneath. Minjun pulled her tight against him, his face buried in her hair. I love you, Amara Johnson. So much it terrifies me.
Good.
Be terrified with me. And then let's build something beautiful anyway. They ate dinner together in that safe house, and Minjun told her stories about his father before the fall, about the good memories before everything went wrong. Amara talked about Ghana, about her childhood, about her mother who she couldn't wait for Minjun to meet someday. They planned a future that felt impossible and perfect all at once. And when they went to bed that night, wrapped in each other, Amara knew with bone-deep certainty that she'd found what she came to Seoul looking for. Not just survival, not just safety, but love that transformed everything. 2 days later, Minjun's phone rang while they were having breakfast, and his expression went carefully neutral as he answered. Amara had learned to read his moods, and this was his handling business face. She continued eating her rice and kimchi, giving him privacy, until she heard him say something sharp in Korean and saw his knuckles go white around the phone. What is it? She asked when he hung up. The Jade Snakes weren't acting alone. They were being funded by someone bigger. Someone who wants to destabilize my organization and use them as pawns. His eyes were cold, calculating. Jin Ho just identified who. Lee Sang-woo. He runs the largest criminal organization in Busan and has been looking to expand into Seoul for years. Is that bad? It's very bad. Lee doesn't play by the usual rules. He's ambitious, ruthless, and smart enough to be actually dangerous. Minjun set down his phone with controlled precision. He's been using the Jade Snakes to test my defenses, to see how I'd respond. And now that he knows about you, he didn't need to finish. Amara understood. She'd become Minjun's visible weakness. His vulnerability that could be exploited. What do? We end this before it escalates. I'm meeting with Lee tomorrow in neutral territory. Jin Ho is arranging security. It'll be a negotiation first, but Minjun's jaw tightened. If negotiation fails, it becomes something else. I'm coming with you. Absolutely not. Minjun. Amara, no. This is dangerous even for me. I'm not bringing you into Lee's crosshairs. I'm already in them, she pointed out. He already knows about me. Hiding me doesn't change that. But showing up together, showing him I'm not some helpless victim he can use against you, that might actually help. Or it makes you a bigger target. I trust you to protect me. Don't you trust me to be strong enough to handle this? That stopped him. He stared at her, conflict warring across his features. Finally, he said, You're going to give me gray hair before I'm 50. Is that a yes? That's a... You're impossible to argue with, and I'm apparently incapable of denying you anything. He pulled her close, kissing her forehead. But you stay with Jin Ho at all times. You don't speak unless I tell you it's safe. And if anything goes wrong, you run. Immediately. No arguing. Promise me. I promise.
I mean it, Amara.
If shooting starts, you run and don't look back. If shooting starts, we both run, she countered. I'm not losing you, Minjun Park. Not to Lee. Not to anyone. We survive this together or not at all. The ferocity in her voice made him smile despite the situation. How did I ever think I was the dangerous one in this relationship? You're dangerous to your enemies. I'm dangerous to your heart. She kissed him softly. Now tell me everything I need to know about Lee Sang-woo, so I'm prepared tomorrow. They spent the rest of the day planning, strategizing, preparing for every possibility. And when Amara finally fell asleep that night in Minjun's arms, she dreamed not of danger, but of victory, of survival, of the future they'd build together on the other side of this final confrontation. Because she'd meant what she told Minjun's aunt. She was all in now, and nothing, not Lee, not danger, not the entire criminal underworld of Seoul, was going to take this love away from her. The meeting was set for a warehouse in Yongsan, neutral territory that belonged to neither Minjun nor Lee Sang-woo. It was the kind of place where Seoul's criminal elite resolved their differences, one way or another. The building was old, cavernous, with rusted metal beams and concrete floors that had seen decades of transactions both legal and otherwise. Minjun arrived with Amara at his side, Jinho, and 6 armed guards forming a protective perimeter around them. Across the warehouse floor, Lee Sang-woo waited with his own contingent, a man in his 50s with silver hair and the kind of expensive suit that spoke of old money and older violence. The famous Dragon of Seoul, Lee said in Korean, his voice carrying across the empty space. And you brought your woman. How sentimental. Minjun's expression remained neutral, but Amara felt his hand tighten slightly on hers before he released it, stepping forward to close some of the distance between them. She stayed with Jinho as instructed, watching everything with careful attention. You funded the Jade Snake's attack on my territory, Minjun said without preamble, switching to English so Amara could understand. A courtesy, or perhaps a message to Lee that he had nothing to hide from her. You used them to test my defenses, to see if I was vulnerable. That stops today. Does it? Lee smiled, also switching to English. I think what stops today is your reign over Seoul, Park. You've grown soft, distracted. A man in love is a man with weaknesses I can exploit. His eyes slid to Amara with calculating interest. Beautiful, I'll give you that. Is she worth dying for? She's worth killing for, Minjun replied, his voice dropping to that deadly, quiet register Amara had learned meant he was most dangerous. Which is what will happen if you continue this path. I didn't come here to negotiate territory, Lee. I came here to offer you one chance to walk away with your life and your organization intact. You're offering me mercy? Lee laughed, genuinely amused. You're more arrogant than I thought. I'm offering you reality. You can't take Seoul. You don't have the connections, the political backing, or the manpower to displace me. What you have is ambition that's going to get you killed if you're not careful. Minjun's posture remained relaxed, but Amara could see the coiled tension in his shoulders. I'm willing to discuss a partnership. Limited expansion into Seoul's southern districts in exchange for cooperation on the Busan ports. Both our organizations profit. No bloodshed. No war. Lee considered this, his expression unreadable. Then he shook his head slowly. You mistake me for someone who wants to share, Park. I want what you have. All of it. And I think your weakness for that woman makes now the perfect time to take it. The temperature in the warehouse dropped. Amara saw Jinho's hand move toward his gun, saw Minjun's guards shift positions subtly. But Minjun himself remained still, his voice even colder than before. Then you've made your choice. And I've made mine. He pulled out his phone, pressed a single button, and suddenly the warehouse was flooded with light as the doors rolled open on all sides. Dozens of men poured in, all wearing Minjun's colors, all armed, all moving with military precision to surround Lee's smaller force. Police officers appeared among them, including several high-ranking officials Amara recognized from news broadcasts. Lee's face went pale as he realized he'd been outmaneuvered. You see, Lee, the difference between us isn't that I've gone soft, Minjun said conversationally, walking forward with absolute confidence. It's that I've evolved. I have legitimate business interests now. Political connections. Law enforcement in my pocket. You're still playing the old game with old rules. I've changed the board entirely. You can't. I already have. Chief Inspector Kwan, please read Mr. Lee his charges. One of the police officers stepped forward, producing a warrant. Lee Sang-woo, you're under arrest for drug trafficking, money laundering, conspiracy to commit murder, and about 15 other charges we've been building for the past 6 months. Thanks to Mr. Park's cooperation with our organized crime unit. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Minjun had used the law itself as a weapon, flipping his own criminal empire toward legitimacy while using his knowledge to take down a rival. It was brilliant, ruthless, and exactly the kind of move that made him the Dragon of Seoul. Lee's men had no choice but to surrender. Fighting the police would be suicide, and their boss was already being handcuffed, his empire crumbling around him in the span of 5 minutes. As the police led Lee away, he turned back to Minjun with something like respect mixed with his fury. You really have changed, Park. I didn't think you had it in you. I didn't either, Minjun admitted. But then I found something worth changing for. His eyes found Amara across the warehouse, and the look he gave her was so full of love and triumph that she felt tears burning behind her eyes. He'd done it. He'd protected her, protected them, without having to destroy himself in the process. He'd found a third way between the violence of his past and the vulnerability of love. When the police finally cleared out, taking Lee and his men with them, Minjun crossed the warehouse floor to Amara in long strides and pulled her into his arms, lifting her off her feet as he kissed her with fierce relief. "It's over," he murmured against her lips. "It's finally over. Lee's organization will collapse without him. The other families will fall in line rather than risk the same treatment. We're safe, Amara. You're safe." "We're safe," she corrected, cupping his face in her hands.
Together.
"Like I told you we would be." "Together," he agreed, and kissed her again as his men discreetly gave them privacy, Jin-ho directing the cleanup with efficient calm. That night, back in Minjun's penthouse with the city glittering below them, they celebrated their victory in the most intimate way possible. Minjun made love to Amara with a joy and freedom she'd never felt from him before, as if some final wall had crumbled between them. And afterward, wrapped in silk sheets with her head on his chest, he told her his plans. "I'm stepping back from active operations," he said, his fingers trailing through her hair. "Transitioning everything to legitimate businesses over the next year. Jin-ho will handle the day-to-day of what's left of the criminal side until it's phased out completely. I'm done with that life, Amara. I want to build something new."
With you.
"What kind of something? I don't know yet. Maybe real estate development. Maybe venture capital. Maybe something neither of us has thought of yet." He tilted her face up to look at him. "But whatever it is, I want you beside me. Not as my employee. Not as someone I'm protecting. As my partner. My equal. My wife, if you'll have me." Amara's breath caught. "Are you proposing?" "Not yet. I want to do it properly. After I meet your mother. After you've had time to really think about what sharing your life with me means. But I'm telling you my intentions, Amara Johnson. I intend to marry you. To build a life with you. To give you everything you came to Seoul looking for and more besides." "I came to Seoul looking for survival," she whispered. "And I found you instead. Found love. Found home. Found myself again." "Then say you'll stay. Say you'll build this new life with me. Say you're mine forever, not just for now." "I'm yours forever," she promised, sealing it with a kiss. "Always and completely yours, Minjun Park." "Mine," he breathed, the word of vow and a prayer. "My Amara. My love. My future." They made love again as dawn approached, and this time it was slow and sweet and full of promises about all the tomorrows they'd have together. When they finally slept, tangled in each other with satisfied smiles on their faces, the morning sun painted everything gold. The dragon of Seoul had found his treasure, and she had found her home. 6 months later, Amara stood in the penthouse kitchen, humming an old Ghanaian song as she prepared jollof rice for the dinner party Minjun was hosting. But this wasn't just any dinner party. This was the night she'd been nervously anticipating for weeks. Her mother was coming. Mrs. Rose Johnson had arrived in Seoul 3 days ago, brought on a first-class flight that Minjun had paid for, her diabetes under control thanks to the treatments he'd arranged and funded. She'd spent the first day crying, the second day marveling at the city, and the third day interrogating Minjun about his intentions toward her daughter with a directness that would have terrified most men. Minjun had loved every minute of it. "She reminds me of you," he told Amara afterward, grinning. "Strong. No nonsense. Impossible to lie to. Now I know where you get it from." Now, as Amara stirred the rice and added the perfect amount of spice, she heard her mother's voice in the living room speaking with Minjun in the careful English she'd been practicing. Their laughter drifted into the kitchen, warm and genuine, and Amara felt her heart swell with a happiness so complete it almost hurt. She'd done it. She'd survived. She'd thrived. She'd found love in the most unexpected place with the most unexpected person, and now her mother was here to witness it, healthy and happy and so proud Amara could feel it radiating from her. "Something smells incredible," Minjun said, appearing in the kitchen doorway with that soft expression he wore only for her. 6 months of peace had changed him in subtle ways. The hard edges had smoothed slightly. He smiled more easily, laughed more often. The dragon was still there when needed, but the man underneath got to breathe more freely now. Jollof rice, fried plantains, chicken stew, all my mother's recipes. Amara turned to face him, wiping her hands on a towel. Is she okay out there? She's perfect. Currently examining my art collection and asking pointed questions about whether I paid fair wages to the artists. His eyes danced with amusement. I like her very much. She likes you too. She told me this morning that you're a good man with a good heart who treats my daughter like a queen. That's high praise from Rose Johnson. I intend to keep earning it. He moved closer, pulling her into his arms despite the cooking smells clinging to her. Are you happy, Amara? Deliriously. Impossibly. Perfectly happy. She kissed him softly. 6 months ago, I was terrified and alone and convinced I'd made terrible choices. Now my mother is here, healthy and safe. I'm living in this beautiful home with the man I love. I'm taking Korean language classes at the university. I'm building a life I never dreamed I could have. You deserve all of it, every bit of happiness and more. So, do you? She touched his face tenderly. You've changed so much, Minjun. Letting go of the violence. Building something legitimate. You're becoming the man you always were underneath, and it's beautiful to watch. I'm becoming the man you make me want to be, he corrected. You saved me, Amara. From myself. From a life that would have eventually destroyed me. We saved each other. That's what love does. They were interrupted by Rose's voice calling from the living room. Amara, darling, are you going to hide in that kitchen all evening? Come talk to your mother. Laughing, they returned to the living room hand in hand. The dinner party was small and intimate. Just Rose, Jin-ho and his wife, Dr. Huang, and Mrs. Kim from the restaurant who had insisted on bringing enough kimchi to feed an army despite being a guest. They ate Amara's Ghanaian feast alongside Mrs. Kim's Korean dishes, the cultures blending on the table the way Minjun and Amara's lives had blended together. Stories were shared in a mixture of languages. Laughter filled the penthouse that had once been so cold and empty. And watching Minjun help her mother to more food, listening to him tell stories that made Rose laugh until she cried, Amara felt the last piece of her heart settle into place. This was home. Not Ghana. Not Seoul. This collection of people from different worlds who'd come together because of love. After dinner, while the others were having coffee in the living room, Minjun pulled Amara out onto the balcony. The city spread below them, millions of lights in the darkness, and the Han River reflected the moon like a silver ribbon. I have something for you, he said, pulling a small velvet box from his pocket. Amara's heart stopped. Minjun. I know I said I'd wait, but having your mother here, seeing you so happy, knowing this is real and forever. He opened the box to reveal a ring that took her breath away. A diamond that caught the city lights and threw them back in rainbow colors, set in platinum with delicate Korean-inspired designs along the band. I can't wait anymore, Amara. I want to make you my wife. I want to build our future officially, completely, with no reservations. Will you marry me? Yes, she breathed, tears streaming down her face. Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes. He slid the ring on her finger with shaking hands, and then he was kissing her, and she was kissing him back, and through the balcony door she heard her mother's delighted cry and the others' cheers. When they finally broke apart, Minjun rested his forehead against hers, both of them grinning like fools. You're mine now, he said softly. Officially. Forever. I was always yours, she replied. From that first morning when you saw me, when you chose to care, when you changed both our lives with simple kindness. Not simple. Never simple with you. He kissed her again, softer this time. But always worth it. Always, always worth it. They returned to the party to celebrate their engagement, and the night stretched on with joy and laughter and love. When everyone finally left and Rose retired to her guest room, Minjun and Amara stood on that balcony again, wrapped in each other, looking at the city that had brought them together. I love you, Amara whispered, more than I have words for. I love you too. My Amara. My treasure. My home. Always yours, she promised. Always mine, he agreed. and Seoul sparkled below them, full of possibility and promise, a city that had once felt like a prison but now felt like the perfect backdrop for their love story. A forbidden love that had conquered every obstacle, a power dynamic that had transformed into partnership, a dragon who had found his heart, a woman who had found her strength. Together, they'd survived. Together, they'd thrived. Together, they'd built something beautiful from the ashes of their separate pain. And together, they'd live happily ever after. 3 years later, the morning sun streamed through the windows of the house in Hanamdong, a place that was somehow both grander and warmer than the penthouse had been. Amara woke slowly, luxuriously, to the smell of coffee brewing and something delicious cooking. She smiled before even opening her eyes. Minjun was cooking breakfast again. He'd gotten surprisingly good at it over the years, though he still occasionally called her for advice on temperatures and timing. She stretched in their bed, the sheets silk against her skin, and caught sight of her reflection in the mirror across the room. She barely recognized herself from the terrified woman who'd showed up for work 5 years ago with bandages on her face. That woman had been surviving. This woman, glowing with health and confidence in one of Minjun's shirts, was thriving. The past 3 years had transformed both their lives completely. Minjun had successfully transitioned his entire operation into legitimate business, becoming a respected real estate developer and venture capitalist. He sat on charity boards, funded scholarships, used his wealth and influence for good rather than control. The Dragon of Seoul had become simply Minjun Park, devoted husband and businessman. Though everyone who knew him understood that the steel underneath never truly went away. It had just found better purposes. For Amara, the transformation had been equally dramatic. She'd finished her Korean language certification, then enrolled in university to study international business. She'd started a foundation helping immigrant workers in Korea navigate the system that had once trapped her. She'd brought her mother to Seoul permanently, setting her up in a beautiful apartment nearby where Rose had become the unofficial grandmother to half the neighborhood. And 6 months ago, Amara had launched her own business, a consulting firm that helped Korean companies build ethical international recruitment programs. It was small but growing, meaningful work that used her experience to help others avoid the exploitation she'd suffered. She was no longer invisible. She was seen, valued, powerful in her own right. "I know you're awake," Minjun called from the kitchen. "I can feel you thinking from here." Laughing, Amara got out of bed and padded to the kitchen, where she found her husband plating bibimbap with the kind of focused concentration he brought to everything he did. He'd abandoned his usual suits for casual clothes on weekends, jeans and a soft sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. Though his eyes still carried that sharp intelligence that had first captivated her. "You're making bibimbap for breakfast?" she asked, sliding her arms around his waist from behind. "Your mother is coming for lunch. I wanted to practice before I embarrass myself trying to impress her again." He turned in her arms, kissing her thoroughly. "Good morning, Mrs. Park." "Good morning, Mr. Park." She never got tired of that. Mrs. Park. His wife. His partner. His equal. "How long have you been up?" "An hour. I had some emails to handle, and I didn't want to wake you." His hands settled on her hips, pulling her closer. "You were sleeping so peacefully. You looked happy." "I am happy. Ridiculously, impossibly happy." She touched his face, feeling the familiar thrill that came from loving this man. "Some mornings I still can't believe this is my life." "Believe it. You earned it. Every bit of it." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "You transformed yourself, built a career, made a difference. And you did it all while putting up with me." "Putting up with you is the easiest part," she teased. "You're disgustingly devoted and surprisingly easy to live with." "Surprisingly? I thought the dragon would be more demanding, more difficult. But you're just you, Minjun. The man who brings me coffee in bed and cooks me breakfast and holds me when I have nightmares about the past." "Those nightmares are getting rarer," he observed, concern flickering in his eyes. He always noticed, always cared. "Because I'm healing. Because we built something safe together. Because I trust you completely." She pulled him toward the table. "Now feed me this bibimbap before it gets cold and you have to start over." They ate breakfast together as they did every morning, talking about their plans for the day, about the foundation's upcoming gala, about her mother's insistence that they needed to give her grandchildren soon. Normal domestic conversation between two people who loved each other. It was perfect. After breakfast, while Minjun cleaned up, he'd instituted a whoever doesn't cook does the dishes rule that Amara found endlessly amusing given his past. She stood on their balcony looking at Seoul in the morning light. 5 years ago, she'd arrived in this city desperate and alone. She'd been used, abused, overlooked, treated as less than human by a system that saw her only as cheap labor. She'd nearly broken under the weight of it all. But she hadn't broken. She'd survived. And in surviving, she'd found Minjun, found love, found herself. "What are you thinking about?" Minjun asked, joining her on the balcony with fresh coffee for them both. "About how far we've come. About that morning when you first really saw me." She turned to face him, this man who had changed her entire life with simple compassion. "Do you remember what you said? When you found out about Juno?" "I said, 'Who did this to you?'" Minjun pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. "And then I said you were mine to protect. You saved my life that day."
No, Amara.
"You saved your own life by being strong enough to survive until I finally paid attention. I just gave you the tools to thrive." He pulled back to look at her seriously. "You did the rest. Built your career. Healed your trauma. Became the incredible woman standing in front of me." "We saved each other," she insisted. "That's the truth of it. I gave you a reason to change. You gave me the safety to grow. We're better together than we ever were apart." Together, he agreed, the word they'd made their vow. Always together. They stood like that for a long time, wrapped in each other as Seoul woke up fully around them. And Amara thought about all the invisible women still struggling in the city. All the people who needed someone to see them, to care, to offer a hand up rather than exploitation. "I want to expand the foundation," she said suddenly. "Open branches in other cities. Help more people. Then we will. Whatever you need. Whatever resources it takes." He squeezed her gently. "I told you once that I built my empire, so I'd never be helpless again. Now I get to use that empire to make sure other people don't have to feel helpless either. Because of you. Because you showed me what power should really be used for." "I love you," she whispered, feeling the truth of it in every cell of her body. "So much, Minjun. So much it still scares me sometimes."
Good.
"Be scared with me. And then let's build something beautiful anyway." He tilted her face up, his eyes full of the love that had transformed them both. "You're mine, Amara Park. My wife. My partner. My heart. And I'm yours. Forever. Nothing will ever change that." "Forever," she promised, kissing him as the morning sun painted everything gold. And in Seoul, in a house filled with love and laughter and the scent of coffee and spices blending together, Amara felt completely, utterly, perfectly whole.